we need to develop little humans, and we need to develop ourselves as humans to be the best version of ourselves that we possibly can, because the world kind of demands that.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Therapy Unmasked here at Ability Innovations. And today it's just me and Nick. We're sitting down today. Now, Nick, if you had to define emotional regulation to maybe someone who doesn't really understand what it is, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say it's the ability that a kid, because we're talking about kids here, it's the ability that a kid or a person has to attune their emotions to what is going on around them. And so for some kids, that might be like what's going on around them is smaller than what their emotion is coming out as, or vice versa. Or sometimes it's just like being able to process through that quickly. And, like something might be sad and it's okay to cry about it for a minute, but if that goes on for 30 to 60 minutes, not so much. So that's kind of what it looks like, is being able to attune what you are feeling and doing inside to what is actually happening around you. And kids are learning that. And so they don't quite fully understand that idea, that concept.
Right. Yeah. I've heard the terms like learning to calm yourself,
Yeah. Self-soothe, or, I think for kids, we just know that every emotion is huge. And sometimes it's the first time that they're really experiencing that emotion. So it gets away from them.
It can be overwhelming.
Even silliness like can be overwhelming, and they just go down the rabbit hole, and then just everything falls apart from there.
With us being Ability Innovations, we're a very play-based environment, right? We really pride ourselves on kids obtaining and receiving progress as they play. Now, with that being said, what does play-based therapy look like when it comes to regulating kids' emotions or teaching them how to regulate their emotions?
Play-based therapy is unique in that emotions will just come up like randomly. And sometimes we can kind of push on emotions, is what I call it, a little bit during play. Because I know that like some kids, for example, really hate to lose. And so I might be able to make it so that I win the game, and I can push on that emotion a little bit because we can see where their frustration level gets to. So during play-based interactions that we have with the kids, we're able to see those emotions when they come up, or for lack of a better word, instigate those emotions so that we can work on them in the clinic, but in a safe way. So if it just happens naturally, what the kid thinks is naturally, then it resolves itself naturally too. Mm-hmm. Whereas, sometimes we might do like a simulated thing, like a role play. Like I've done this in other clinics where we'll sit down and we'll say like, what happens when you get mad? And the kid is like going through this simulated experience. What might you do? And the kid really has no concept of what it is when they are getting mad, because they don't have the ability to self-reflect or be self-aware enough to really understand what they're doing. It just happens to them a lot of times.
Yeah, interesting. That reminds me of an experience that I saw at our Ogden clinic one time with Lexi. She's a occupational therapy assistant over there. And she was working with this kid who really loved to play Uno. And it was interesting because she sat down with this kid and this kid's mom and her, and they all played Uno. And Lexi would purposely cheat every once in a while in the turn. Like she would put a card down that she was not supposed to. And the kid would have this like emotional outburst, in a sense, like, you can't cheat, you can't do that, that's not fair. And he would break down a little bit. But Lexi was teaching him like, how do we tell people cheating is wrong and you shouldn't cheat without losing control. So I thought that was a really interesting way that she was cheating on purpose to kind of teach him a lesson.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And we do that in all different circumstances. And then there's sometimes where it reminds me that kids will do that after they've seen me do that, then they'll do that and they'll try and do that. And then I'll get to show them and model what an appropriate response is without breaking down. The kid would start cheating and I would go like, oh, We're not supposed to cheat, remember? And then I would say, or what if I did it like this? And I was like, you can't cheat. And I just, throw a fit and they're like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You're like, you're right. I shouldn't just yell at people. That's kind of rude. So it gives us the opportunity in kind of a fun atmosphere. And I think that's definitely the way to approach children, because they don't have that higher level thinking, that metacognition or that self-awareness to really pick apart what they're doing. And so you kind of have to show them what they're doing. And when you do it in a safe way in the moment, it just goes so much better.
Right. They trust you. And I think it takes a while to build that trust, but once it's there, you can cheat with them and it'll all work.
You can kind of sabotage what you're
Right.
doing. And that's the unique thing too, is that when parents are able to do that, when they can come to the sessions and they can see how the therapist does that, then they might be able to do that at home or something similar. And it helps them to interact with their child in a way that's more fluid than sitting down and lecturing or some of those things that we like to do as adults, because we want to think of our children as little adults, but they're really not. They're developing. And so they're not quite to that level. And some kids will build up to that level when you talk to them like that, but most kids want to be treated like kids.
So we do see cases here, and even at our sister clinic in Children in Motion, where a kid will essentially shut down and they won't want to talk to anyone around them. And they'll kind of bottle those emotions. And then eventually, like, those emotions will explode. And that's where we get tantrums and things like that. So how does play-based therapy help prevent those tantrums, or are those tantrums a good thing? Or like, what are your thoughts as an OT on shutting down as a child?
Yeah, and we do see this a lot, and especially in like younger kids or kids that don't have a lot of language, we might see more tantrums. And so it's a pretty normal thing for a kid or, to shut down. And one of the really interesting things about our methodology with play-based is that it's geared towards those types of kids that kind of withdraw and pull into their own world, or they live in their own world. And through play, we're able to get into their world and then draw them into ours a little bit more. Once they've come kind of out of their own little world, then they start to look at the different ways that they can interact in the world around them. And that's a developmental process. Like babies do that. Babies are kind of in their own little world. And as they grow, they start to recognize and track people around them, make eye contact, make faces back and forth. But largely when they come out of the womb, like they're inside of themselves and they don't really pay attention to the stimulus that's going around them. So that process that we follow is very developmental. And the play-based method that we use is very specific to that. So when I have like a kid that is shutting down and drawing into themselves, I'm able to just kind of meet them where they're at. There's been times where the kid happens to shut down or melt down like right in the middle of the waiting room. And sometimes I just lay down on the floor with them right there where they're at. If they see that I'm on the same level as them, like even physically, sometimes they look over at me and they're like, whoa, adults don't normally do this. Like I laid down and scooted underneath the table to get away from this, but that therapist just laid down on the floor and came under the table with me. And that's something that I think in the past has like opened the kids' eyes. And then they're like, do you just need some time to like calm down a little bit? Let's go in here where it's nice and quiet. And then they'll go in there with me, and maybe the mom or somebody, they go in there with them, and we shut off the lights and we interact with them, kind of meeting them where they're at. And I think that gives the kids the opportunity to just be drawn out of their world gradually and naturally. Gradually, we start to show them that getting out of their world and into the world around them, into our world or into the world around them, they find joy in that too.
Yeah, I like that, because in my mind, I'm picturing like, so you're up here, like as an adult, the child's here, you're meeting them there to eventually pull them up with you.
Yeah.
So I love that.
It's all part of relationship building too, because that's the key behind any of the play-based stuff, any of the developmental stuff. The way that we develop and the way that we play with children is all about relationship. It's getting on their level and helping them feel safe and letting them know that if you love doing this thing, or if this is what is important to you at this particular moment in time, if I engage in that with you, then you're going to love me for it. We connect with them where they're at in their world, and then we start to show them more of the world around them from there.
So speaking of those meltdowns, kind of looking at the reason that those meltdowns happen, do you feel like when a child is melting down that that's a choice, or that there's maybe some environmental or sensory reasons causing that meltdown? And how does you as an OT address that?
Yeah, I mean, we try and look at it from all different angles. We're taught that as occupational therapy practitioners to kind of look at the whole picture, all different factors and facets of what makes a human a human. And so sometimes it is a manipulation thing or a behavior thing that they're trying to do. But a lot of times, I think most of the time, it's probably sensory. Like something has happened and it triggers them the wrong way, or they're just needing something, whether that's like communication. You know, they say that all of the, like in a toddler, all of the meltdowns and things that they're experiencing are a form of communication. So if parents are looking at it going like, what is the kid trying to tell me? Like beyond what I'm seeing with the screaming and the flailing arms and all of that, what is it that they actually need? What are they trying to tell me? A lot of times that's some sensory stuff. Like even if a kid like is told no and then they tantrum, it might be a feeling of overwhelm, right? They might be like, I'm at my wit's end and then you told me no and I just fall apart. And I don't understand, and I'm freaking out because I was told no, and I really needed that, or I really wanted that, or I really am just full, and I'm spilling over. And so sometimes that's just telling us like, let's give you the kind of soothing and calming kinds of sensory input that you might be needing. And then we'll go back to whatever it was that we were talking about. Like, do you want this or do you want this? And they're like saying, I really want the Oreos, you know, and we're like, can't give you Oreos right now, but here's your choices, this or this. When they're in a calm state, they can usually do the choices and the rationalization that we want them to do. But if they're overwhelmed or sensory's out of whack at all, they're not going to be able to do that. They're too low in their brain. I had a parent yesterday that said it's their basement brain. And I really like that concept. Like we've got our higher level brain that's our kind of attic and upstairs brain. And then we've got our basement brain that just, if things aren't going well, we just fall apart. So I like that idea, the basement brain. So if they're in their basement brain, it's over.
Yeah. So it's all about getting them into that just right state of mind. So whether you have to bring them down or bring them up, and then they're more open to making decisions.
And occupational therapists are pretty skilled in that. But I wouldn't discredit anybody else that works with kids, like any teachers and stuff, any physical therapists or speech therapists or social workers or anything like that. If they've been around kids enough, they kind of know how to massage that a little bit to help children. So
yeah, I guess it's common for, I guess all kids have tantrums. But emotional regulation and the therapy we offer is for those cases where the tantrums are very frequent and maybe out of control, would you say?
Yeah. So if the main factor that the kid is coming to the clinic for is because of emotional regulation, like it's happening several times a day. And for us as adults, it's really hard to deal with that. Like parents that are at home witnessing this or being in the middle of this over and over all day long, every day, it's very taxing on us too. And we start to lose our stuff and we're ready to tantrum too. But for kids that are working on that, like there really has to be something that helps them get into that just right zone. Otherwise, their sensory system is always on overload. And you can imagine like if you are in constant pain or you are in constant fight or flight, it is so taxing on your body, mentally, physically, hormonally. Like it's not an easy way to live when you're always in survival mode.
So what we've been discussing is similar to the just right challenge, right? Like bringing them into that perfect happy medium. So how do you do that as an OT?
When we're working with kids, like that play-based method that we use is attuned to that like so well. We're really trying to get them into that just right zone because everything happens around that just right zone. And even our speech language pathologists, when they're working with kids, they love to have the kid in occupational therapy before because they get all this sensory stuff that they need, all this sensory input. And then things just magically work when they're in speech right after.
Right. They can learn better.
Yeah, because we get them so close or into that just right area of their life. And so as adults, what that looks like is you feel completely safe. You feel peaceful and calm inside. You're able to connect with the people around you. Like, even if you're not a social person, like you can make connections with people around you fluidly and easily. And things just work. Like you're able to learn, you're able to rationalize, you're able to do whatever it is that you need to do in your day. When something is off, like say you've got anxiety really high that day, or something is just really bothering you, like maybe your stomach just doesn't feel right, or you've got a headache, or things that just throw us off a little bit, it's harder to do our work. It's harder to focus and pay attention. Our relationships are just a little bit harder, like all of those things. So when we're working with kids, that's what we're looking for, is if we can get them into that zone where they're able to connect with us socially, they seem to be happy and calmer after we do certain sensory activities that might be calming or regulating, and they're able to process more of what's going on around them instead of drawing inward, then we're like, okay, we're hitting it. We're here. This is that just right area. And that's different for every kid, and it's different for every person on any given day. It takes a skilled eye to kind of find that with kids, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible for parents to do either. Like you probably know your kids better than we do, but our techniques and our sensory strategies and things like that are what kind of make up the difference, and we can see what works. I tell parents that the biggest thing to do is just to watch and observe, because kids will largely show you what they need. So for instance, if I see a kid that is just constantly getting up and down and moving around the house and doing stuff, I'm like, oh, they need movement. They're already doing it. They're already showing me that. Or if I see a kid that's just constantly crashing to the ground, I'm like, oh, they need deep pressure, because, kids will just largely seek out or display what they actually need inside.
That's interesting. Yeah. Something you don't really think of, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. If you watch them, if you just kind of stand back and watch them, they largely show you what they need.
First of all, like when it comes to like understanding the emotions, we talked about the crash outs, the temper tantrums, how we resolve that. So as an occupational therapist, and I even know other therapists here that aren't occupational therapists that do this too, how do you label these emotions? And maybe like, I've heard of like the zones of regulation, and there's different color coordinating patterns. So give us just a quick crash course on all of that.
Yeah. So emotions are interesting because kids don't really understand emotions very well. And so they kind of need to be labeled in their life, and they need to understand like, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and it has a name. And when we start with that, then we can start to identify what the difference is between being happy and being silly, or being frustrated versus being angry. And sometimes they lead to each other, but like it starts with labeling them. And that's why the zones of regulation program comes in so well, is because they've kind of categorized certain feelings. And when kids are learning all of that, we can say like, these are blue kinds of feelings. Like I'm feeling sad or sick or tired. And then the feelings that are happy and calm and peaceful are green. And then some of the kind of like warning kinds of feelings are yellow. Those are things like silliness, frustration, being annoyed. Those kinds of things are yellow, and they might lead to red emotions, which are anger, the meltdown kinds of things, the yelling, screaming, thrashing, or biting. Like all of that usually happens in the red zone. And we teach kids that when you're in the red zone, you got to get back to green. And what kinds of things can bring us from red to green, or what kinds of things can bring us down just incrementally into the yellow and then into the green? Or if you're in the blue, can you bring yourself up to green? That's kind of how we frame the zones of regulation for kids. And even beyond that, there's a lot of books and things out there. There's some color coordinating books. They don't exactly follow the zones of regulation idea, but it's at the same time they're great. They're like the colored emotion books, or they have one that's about a scribble, and that's probably more accurate to how we are inside. We've got all these different emotions and they're jumping all around. But if we can regulate and we can get those emotions in line, we actually turn into the little spot that's rainbow colored. And so he's got just different stripes of all of these different colors. And that's what we want to be, is in that just right zone when everything is good, all of our emotions just kind of flow as a beautiful rainbow instead of being all jumbled together and all of a sudden everything turns red or things like that. Like,
Yeah, I like that a lot. And also, like, this is reminding me a little bit of like visual schedules and things like that, because it creates like a very visual, easy to understand thing for the kid to go off of. I've seen OTs tailor this, like maybe they don't use colors, but they use Pokemon or they use Sonic, and they're like, okay, what hedgehog are you right now? Are you the red one? Are you the blue one? Or they'll be like, what Pokemon are you? Are you yellow? Are you Pikachu? Or are you Charizard? Are you the red?
yeah,
So
Pikachu is always like yellow and he's like just about to explode into his like screaming Pikachu and that thing. And those things are fun. They're really more like attuned to the individual needs of a kid. So if a kid is really into Sonic or Minecraft or things like that, then we just kind of use that same idea of different emotions and put them into context. Yeah. And I think that we all respond to that. Like the Japanese, for example, they have little cartoon characters for everything in their country. And I think some of their emotions are expressed really well in their anime. And I think people kind of identify with that in a very real sense. And it's in a more salient way for people to understand things, just to have some kind of visual representation of that. And that's how we learn about ourselves, is actually through the world around us. And so if we can make those connections between colors or Pokemon or things like that, I think it helps us.
And I will say OTs are really good at this. So like that would be something you'd want to collab with an OT on putting together some kind of visual chart or something for your child. So
yeah, and I've even done too where we do like, we'll take pictures of kids when, what does it look like when you're angry? And we snap a picture of them and we put that over the red zone and say, like, this is you angry, and what kinds of things happen. Like the parents will say, yeah, he picked up a block and threw it at his sister, and then he screamed at her. And so I say in a session, like, oh yeah, like angry Johnny looks like this, and angry Johnny throws blocks at his sister and yells at her. And we don't want to be angry Johnny. Like, that's not very happy Johnny, right? We want Johnny to be calm and peaceful and happy. So green Johnny looks like this, and here's some things that we can do to get Johnny back to green. I think that all of that really helps kids to understand what the emotions are and how to move through them. And isn't that like something that we're all still trying to do as adults? Yeah. Don't tell any of the children, but we're all still learning how to do that. Like I pop into red sometimes and I have to learn to get back into green. And there's plenty of people that I know that live in that yellow, orangish zone their whole lives. And they're constantly angry about every little thing. And then they calm down and then they get angry again and then they calm down. And life is really hard for them because they're living in that survival zone. And the more that we can get ourselves to green, just like we're teaching kids to do, the more that we can stay in green, the happier our lives are.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like OT is important to help kids develop these fundamental skills that will help them be better adults. Who would have thought, right?
And we don't always know these things just growing. Like nobody else is teaching this. Maybe occupational therapists and some counselors and psychologists maybe are teaching people this, but it's all the same stuff. Like we need to develop little humans, and we need to develop ourselves as humans to be the best version of ourselves that we possibly can, because the world kind of demands that.
And that's why the younger you do it, the better it is for you as you grow older. So
yeah, and I love seeing those videos like on YouTube where adults are teaching, maybe it's parents teaching their kids like, I am strong and I am resilient. And when things go wrong, it's okay. And I can just dust myself off and pick myself up and keep going. And they teach kids these kinds of things. And those are the things that we're teaching them in a different way, maybe with colors and things like that. But those are the things that make society better. Those are the things that make our little superheroes able to address the fights that they have. We say fights loosely, but we're all kind of battling real life each and every day, and it can really tear us down. But if we use our superhero strengths that we learn in therapy, then we can be better.
All right. We've talked a lot about emotional regulation and what goes into that, and sensory, and how our OTs here at the clinic can help calm children and get on their level. And we've talked about the zones of regulation and all that. So when it comes to parents having OT here at the clinic with their child, how can they take what is being learned here and apply it at home? Is it hard? Is it easy? What do you think?
I think largely if they're doing a lot of the same things that they're seeing us do, or sometimes, sometimes parents aren't able to come back in the sessions, and that's okay. When we come back and we talk to them, like, we worked on this today, try these things at home, and we're having that discussion with them, they're able to carry that over and actually like ask the kid what they did and try and do some of those things at home that they talked about in therapy. Even just little stuff like that is super helpful because it generalizes the information. But also, like, we've got all these videos and these resources online, and you can really learn a whole lot of techniques and things to do at home, or even like a sensory diet. I don't always use the term sensory diet, but I like the connotation of it, is that there's proper nutrition that we need for our sensory selves. And if we're feeding our sensory selves the right kinds of nutrition and things throughout the day, if we have a good diet, then we get stronger and we get better. And we're able to do all the things that we need to do. And so I like the idea of the sensory diet. Any kind of sensory program at home, you can totally do that stuff in the comfort of your own home. Your occupational therapy practitioner can help you design one of those specific to your kid. But there's also some generalities. And I think I love talking to parents about this concept, is that there's like 3 main sensory areas that we focus on in the clinic. And those are proprioception, which is the sensation that we have these receptors in our joints and our muscles. They're triggered by heavy work and deep pressure. And proprioception is what helps us understand how to use our bodies in the world and how much force to use, or how to get our body into the certain positions or movements that we need it to do. So even things like moving through an obstacle course at home, like if I'm stepping over toys without crashing, or being able to go up and down stairs, that all takes proprioception, picking a cup up and drinking it. And then proprioception is one of those things that's very regulating too. Like, we feel good after we've done heavy work kinds of things. So that should be the main part of every sensory program at home. And then the other 2 are things that come as needed. So vestibular is the second one. And the vestibular system is our sense of balance and sense of movement. So we can trigger those things with any kind of rocking, swinging, jumping, yoga stances, all of those kinds of things, animal walks that we can do at home. Anytime that your head is lower than your center of gravity, you're triggering your vestibular system. Anytime that you're doing a repetitive movement, like swinging or rocking, like that's your vestibular movement. And so sometimes we know that those things can be calming. Like when we're sitting in a car and we just kind of get drowsy, it's because there's constant movement back and forth or side to side. We don't realize that those tiny little movements are affecting us until we're like, oh, I'm feeling drowsy in the car. And kids, they just fall right to sleep.
And vestibular, that's in your ears, right?
Yeah, it's your inner ear, your sense of balance, your cochlear kind of structures. And the more that we trigger those, especially when they're developing, the more it produces regulation and calming, because you can tell that most of those things are repetitive, the movements and things like that.
You're essentially teaching them how to use their body.
Yeah.
Right? That's basically what
and
you're doing.
They're still learning all of that. I mean, you might be able to walk as a toddler, but how proficient are you at it? And the more input that you give it, the better that they get. Kids sometimes learn it really quickly and others really struggle. The last one that I would mention is called interoception, and that's the sensations that we feel inside of our body. So how do we know when we're tired? How do we know when we're anxious? How do we know when we have to go to the bathroom? What if there's like a bubble in my stomach and I can't tell if I'm sick or if I just need to burp? For kids, they don't really understand what's going on inside of them. That's kind of a foreign concept. And I've met plenty of adults that feel that same way too. Any movement inside of their stomach is like, oh, I think I'm sick. I'm going to throw up. You know, if you have a good understanding of what's going on inside you and how to interpret that, then life is so much easier and you take care of your needs faster and all of those things. So we teach some of those skills in therapy too. And if those kinds of things are going on in any kind of sensory program at home, then it's going to be successful. And we all know the basic 5, like sight and sound and hearing and taste and touch. We all know those, and those things are great, but those don't largely contribute to regulation. Sometimes they do. Like some kids are really seeking those things out, and touch and shaving cream and all those things are fun. But the effect that those have is pretty minimal compared to proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. Those things have a longer lasting effect. So I like to explain that to parents so that they can just start doing those things at home. And I tell parents, if you've got a pretty sensory seeking kid, you need things for them to climb on, swings for them to swing on, little mini trampolines, and crash pads. Mm-hmm. If you have those kinds of things in your house, your kid is going to meet their needs. And if not, then you better be going to the park a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a few parents that have come to our parent support meeting, right, and they live in smaller apartments, so they don't really have access to that stuff.
Can't hang a swing in an apartment.
Right.
Usually.
But they make park time a priority, like every day before like a meal, for example, like before dinner, they'll go to the park for an hour.
Yeah. And I love the parents that think like part of their therapy program is in the winter, I've got to get them into swimming or gymnastics. And in the summer, we go to the park or we do the splash pad or things like that, because that's part of what they need to develop.
Very cool. Well, I've learned a lot. I hope our parents here have too. One thing I did want to bring up as we're closing this episode is that this episode is specifically brought to us by Ability Innovations and Children in Motion's summer camp program. So our summer camps are up and ready for sale right now. We're just asking for a $50 deposit to secure your spot, and then the remaining balance will be due the week before camp starts. And we have a emotional regulation summer camp being taught at our Layton location.
It should be really fun for kids.
Yeah, it is. The teacher is it's Kylie, right? And last year she had so many fun activities for them, and then I think even the last week of her summer camp, they did like a special water themed thing where they were shooting each other with squirt guns, and we had like our water slide set up. It was a lot of fun.
Handwriting course. We've got social skills class, and all of these summer camp programs are so fun for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important too for kids to have their sessions here in the clinic one-on-one with their therapist, right? But to also have these group sessions where they can, for emotional regulation, for example, where they can learn to regulate their emotions like alongside their peers. So they can see how their peers are doing it, maybe mimic behavior, or maybe set an example for other peers, things like that.
And we know that that's how we all learn. Is we don't just learn one-on-one with somebody or sitting at a table. We learn by interacting with the world around us and the people around us. So these groups are part of facilitating that effort.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I will keep all of that linked in the show notes. So feel free to check that out and get your child's spot secured today. Again, we're always happy to do these podcasts for you and provide this information for you. But if you would like to support us, feel free to head to therapy-unmasked.com to check out any blogs, articles, as well as our paid courses that are on there. And anything that you get on there goes to directly supporting what we do here at Ability Innovations and Children in Motion, and we really appreciate it. I don't have anything else to add in regards to emotional regulation. Did you have any final thoughts?
I would just say have fun with it.
Have fun with it. That's good. Well, thanks, Nick, for your time today. I really appreciate it, and we will see you in the next episode of Therapy Unmasked.
Bye.
Bye.